Not too long ago, the geniuses over at Fedora Linux unveiled a plan to drop 32-bit software support completely and utterly from their Linux distribution. Now, I'm not talking about the ability to run on 32-bit CPUs. No. I'm talking about 32-bit library and binary support, just dropping it completely. A move which would effectively render Fedora Linux almost useless when it comes to gaming. The sheer massive number of commercial and AAA game titles that are 32-bit only is just off the charts. It's absolutely staggeringly massive. And so dropping that support would just cripple that as a gaming platform and in a rather intense way. And I pointed this out. Where have I got this here? A couple of times. Most recently, back on the 25th, a couple of days back. And I pointed out how there are, in the world of Linux, several feature and strategy changes coming up that seem to be custom designed to hobble Linux in some way. I'm talking desktop Linux. And this was one of them. Dropping 32-bit support is just asinine crazy. Now, I'm not saying it will be crazy forever, but right now it makes no sense at all. Oh, gee, we're just now at the point where Linux is finally being taken seriously as a gaming platform, right? We finally have reached a real significant threshold of available AAA titles via Steam and GOG and a bunch of other platforms. Let's go ahead and nuke support for 80% of it. It's just the stupidest move I can imagine. Just strategically, it's a bunch of dumb. And so I've been pointing that out for a fair bit. Well, today, or really yesterday, the folks over at Fedora Linux have announced that they have abandoned that proposed change. They are no longer, at least not right away, going to be dropping 32-bit software and library support from their Linux distribution. And here's what's crazy about this. The reasons why they're dropping that support is not because they've seen the light. It's not because they realized that what a boneheaded move it is. They're still committed to dropping support and shooting themselves in the foot. But for the time being, they're going to hold off. Why? For two reasons. The first, and this is the really primary thing, is that as a general rule, Fedora users absolutely hated the idea. They threw an epic fit about it. Fedora users showed up in mass and made hundreds, I think 400 some odd comments about how much they absolutely despised the idea of dropping 32-bit library support. But the Fedora Engineering Steering Committee, basically the small team of people that's really ultimately responsible for driving the future of Fedora Linux, said that they blamed, quote, clickbait tech press, end quote, for forcing this change. Hold on, I'm going to pull this up here because this is fantastic. So this was a post over on the Fedora forum, discussion.fedora blah 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 whatever, by one Fabio Valentini, who is a part of the Fedora Engineering Steering Committee, and again, they're really responsible for making stuff happen. And he says, quote, given feedback in this thread, and this was the 395th comment on the thread in the matter of just a couple days. They really got flooded. Given the feedback in this thread, and to a lesser extent also on the mailing list, I have decided to withdraw this proposal. It is clear that the Fedora 44 target for this change was too early. It's just too early to do that, he says. To some degree, I expected this to be the case and was prepared to move the proposed implementation of the change to a later release. Fedora 44 was just the earliest reasonable target. However, I think this also shows an inherent conflict in the current changes process. If a big change like this one is submitted quite early out of caution, that also front-loads the discussion and discussion process instead of giving things more time. For example, I don't think the discussion would have been meaningfully different if the target release had been Fedora 46 instead of 44, which is one of the reasons why I decided to withdraw the change instead of just retargeting it at a later. That doesn't make any sense. That's illogical. He goes on to say, I don't think the problem that was attempted to be addressed with this proposal will go away. With more and more projects dropping official support for building or running their software in 32-bit architectures, it's just going to get worse over the next few years. Dealing with widely used software falling out from under our feet won't be fun. To some degree, always pushing the latest and greatest software in Fedora is also working against us here. If we just stuck with Foo 1.0 LTS for 10 years, we just wouldn't need to care that Foo 3.0 dropped support for running. What is he even talking about? We're talking about dropping support for a massive number of games. That's what's really coming up here. Here we go. Here's the really big piece. Quote, I am disappointed in some of the reactions to this proposal, and he includes a whole lot of red exclamation points in here because that's fun. This proposal has received, with some people apparently reading it in the most uncharitable way. It was the proposal that tried to address technical problems package maintainers and release engineering is facing, not some conspiracy to break the, quote, gaming use case, end quote. That said, I was expecting a lot of feedback on this one, but not hundreds of people shouting, don't do, and this is all in caps, by the way, don't do this, why don't you care about your users, I will switch distros immediately, levels of feedback, though to some degree, I also blame clickbait tech press or YouTubers for that. I am now looking forward to seeing actual actionable counter proposals. Once again, blaming the clickbait, quote, tech press. And of course, I'm not the only one that was covering this. I can't... The title of this show today is Fedora Blames Lunduke for Saving Fedora. That was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke made by someone over on X who noticed that, yeah, they kind of seem to be taking a little bit of a jab at me there. Whenever anyone in the leftist open source world uses the phrase tech press or tech journalist and puts it in quotes 99 point something into infinity times percent of the time, they mean me. That's just, it's become code for them, right? And they kind of mean it in a derogatory way. So odds are he meant me with that, and it's fine. I was not the only one covering this, because the reality is this is something that it was just so obvious and just transcends any political boundaries or really even just like technical fights. This isn't a VI versus Emacs thing or an X11 versus Wayland thing. This is a do we or do we not want to support 32-bit binary mostly games on a Linux distribution? Like, do we or do we not want that? And by and large, almost every Linux user is like, of course we need that still. Maybe there'll come a point where we don't, but at least for the time being, we do. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of dog at me on this one, and it's kind of an ongoing thing. Someone posted this meme, this funny picture up somewhere. It's the one of a person, riding a bike who then takes a stick and he shoves it in the spoke of his bike and it causes him to flip over, fall down, hurt his leg, and declare, why would someone else do this? And in this case, it's labeled the Foss community is riding the bike, sticks the spoke into the stick into their own spoke, falls over and declares, why would Lunduke do this? And someone posted this I think in response to some random tweet that Andreas Kling, the guy behind the Ladybird browser, made, and posted this up there. It's kind of an ongoing thing, especially lately, almost increasingly, where either groups in the Linux and open source world do something just ridiculously stupid, like shove a stick in the spokes of their bicycle wheel, levels of stupid, and hurts themselves, and then they get mad because I'm the one on the side pointing, going, why'd you do that? No, it's worse than that. It's really, I'm the one saying, hey, guy riding the bike, I see you're carrying a stick. Don't shove it in the wheel. And then the guy shoves the stick in the wheel, and I say, stop, what are you? And then they fall over on the ground, and then they yell, why would Lunduke do this? Because I was the one that pointed out the problem. Right? This is kind of an ongoing thing. And here we have, again, the folks in the Fedora world blaming the fact that Fedora has been saved on clickbait tech press. Like me or me specifically, right? They're blaming me. But what are they blaming me for doing? Well, for mobilizing people, causing hundreds here. Let me pull this up. How many is it? It's something like 400 some odd people have mentioned this. Yeah, someone even posted this, like, wow, this says 400 answers already. That's crazy. And it mobilized people. It alerted people to this. And so what they're really blaming me and the rest of the tech press for is letting people know what Fedora was doing. That's what they're blaming me for here. Is they're blaming me for coming out and saying, hey, everybody, Fedora's doing this. And now that Fedora says, oh, Lunduke is to blame for the problem. The problem is Fedora is saved. You're welcome, Fedora. So Fedora blames Lunduke for saving Fedora. You're absolutely welcome, Fedora. And this isn't the only problem that Fedora is facing right now. There's plenty others as well. But this one was really, honestly, quite existential. If Fedora Linux, which is, I would be remiss if I did not point out that it is owned and run and funded by Red Hat and IBM. Their project leader is an IBM Red Hat employee. That's an official position, right? It's not run by some community. Not really. It's run by Red Hat. There are community members outside that called the community members, though. Take a step back for a second. I and many of you find the phrase open source community, Linux community, Fedora community, etc. somewhat annoying. Because it's not really a community. Much as some of my friends who make a living as community managers within some of these organizations want you to believe. But I digress. They call it a community, so I do. But just the same, right? It's really driven and run by corporate masters, and not just little corporations. We're talking big tech corporations. IBM is running Fedora. So even though some of the people involved in the Fedora engineering steering committee and some of the various other special interest groups and code of conduct groups and whatnot related to Fedora Linux are not all Red Hat employees or IBM employees, ultimately, the ones making the final decisions on things fall down to the staff and management at Red Hat and ultimately at IBM. That just is simply the truth. There are certain Linux distributions where you can point to them and say, that distribution is really run by some weird ragtag group of renegades, right? It's not being driven by a big tech corporation. Like if I want to point to a Gentoo or Open Mandriva, I can feel confident that those distributions are really being driven, whether you like them or not, by a group. Call it a community if you want to, by individuals, not by a corporation. But certain distributions, and I when I really look out there, I think of Fedora Linux and OpenSUSE as the most obvious examples of them, are truly run completely by their corporate owners. And I say that as someone who understands the inner workings of Red Hat pretty darn well and used to sit on the board of OpenSUSE. I was an elected board member of OpenSUSE and worked at SUSE Corporate, which really owns and runs OpenSUSE. And to give you an example of just how extreme that ownership is, the chairman of the board of directors, the board of OpenSUSE, is a SUSE employee. In fact, it's a SUSE vice president. He is ultimately the man in charge. The board of OpenSUSE is 6 members, 3 of which are SUSE corporate members, right? They're people that work at SUSE, but also happen to be on the board at any one time. And 3 other people are from the community, but not working at SUSE. So that means you've got 3 from SUSE Corporate, 3 not from SUSE Corporate, and then the chairman, who is the board, the tiebreaker vote, who is the 7th person, who is also SUSE Corporate, which means it's 4-3. So even if every non-SUSE corporate board member votes a certain way together in lockstep, SUSE corporate can override it 100% of the time. It's ridiculous. It is complete and total control. And then the engineering is really ultimately very much driven by corporate engineers. It's just the way it is. This is true in both Fedora and in SUSE. Now, and OpenSUSE. Now, engineers and team members from both of those Linux distributions will say, Lunduke, you're being clickbait preposterous. That's not true. These distributions are run by whoever does the work, right? So if people show up and do the work, that's who's running the thing. Okay, well, but the companies pay people to show up and do the work and drive it, and to staff the steering committees, and to staff the leadership positions to ultimately make the tiebreaker votes and set the direction of the project. So there is no space or ability for people outside of the corporation to drive the distributions in any fundamentally significant way away from what the big tech corporation wants. That's just the reality of the situation. I don't even know why I'm off on this tangent. It's an important thing for people to fully understand. But just the same, the good news here is Fedora Linux, at least for the next release, will still have 32-bit software support. And Fedora blames me for making that happen. I'm very sorry I hurt you. Show everyone where the bad Lunduke hurt you. I'm very, very sorry. Go to lunduke.com, by the way, if you want to help support the work that I do. If you want to support truly independent tech journalism, which makes Fedora very sad, and makes Red Hat very sad, go to lunduke.com and click some options. There's lots of different ways to subscribe, lots of different ways to listen and watch and all that good stuff. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes, across this fine and glorious inner tube of ours, I do declare, end broadcast.